Before we actually get started talking about the details or the argument of Malcolm's knowledge and belief as it unfolds in his essay, I thought that it might be helpful to look at some of the key terms that Malcolm employs. And if we look to the very end, and there's nothing wrong with skipping to the end of this essay, Malcolm says this, that it was Wittgenstein, the great philosopher who was a teacher of Malcolm's in Cambridge, and they became friends, who gave him what he calls the principal idea of this paper, namely that there is a resemblance in logic between some a priori and some empirical statements. Now, of course, the idea of every one of these essays that we read together is for you to grasp what's going on, to understand it, to be able to think about the subject that the author is talking about, to decide for yourself ultimately whether you agree or disagree with the position that the author takes. So it's absolutely essential that you understand the words that are being used here, and there are some technical expressions here, notably a priori on the one hand, and empirical on the other hand. A priori statements, empirical statements. So a priori and empirical are of course used as adjectives here. So there are different sorts of statements, but what does it mean for a statement to be a priori? What does it mean for a statement to be empirical? Let's start with what I would regard as the easier one first, and that is empirical. And you should see these, if I have time, I will annotate this video so that you should see these terms popping up in front of my face. Empirical comes from the Greek, as so many words do in our language, especially philosophy words, science words, words in general. Many words come from the Greek. We are indebted to the Greeks in all sorts of ways, and especially for much of our vocabulary. Empirical means, it comes from the Greek word empiria, which means experience. And so something which is empirical, let's say empirical knowledge, would be knowledge which we gain from experience. An empirical statement would be a statement that relies in some way or another on experience. So what's an empirical statement? Barack Obama is President of the United States. That is something I believe, something that I think I know, but something that is also an empirical statement in the sense that I know it and believe it because I've had certain experiences, because of things that I've seen and read and heard, all of which indicate that Barack Obama is, as of right now, 2013, is President of the United States. So an empirical statement is any statement that is derived from experience. And empirical knowledge would be knowledge that we get from and only through experience, as opposed to a priori statements or a priori knowledge. Now, the strange thing would be to say that any of our knowledge is not derived from experience. That is, how can I know anything except through experience? That is, how can I know about anything I haven't had experience of? Well, that's a great question, and that's very, it is a very odd thing. But think of certain things that you would say that you know. For instance, the same statement cannot be both true and false at the same time. And there may be some qualifications that we would need to make that exactly right in logic, but I'll just say it again. Think of this statement, that the same statement cannot be both true and false at the same time. And would you say that that is something that you know? I would say it's something that I know. Okay, well, where did you learn it? Did you learn it through experience? Is it something you found out about the world? Each one of us knows that Obama is president. But we know it because we found out about it, that fact about the world, through our experience of one sort or another. Each of us knows that the same statement cannot be both true and false at the same time. Did we find out about that through our experience? Some would say that that is not something that we find out through experience. That is something that we knew, I'm going to put that in quotes, but something that we knew before we had any experience. It is a fundamental assumption, an unquestionable truth, one might say, about reality, about logic and language, and about the way things work in the world. It's what we would call an a priori statement. And a priori just means prior. Let's just say that. I'm not exactly sure what the Latin means actually, but I'm going to emphasize that prior to, and it's prior to experience. Aside from all experience, before all experience, we know certain things. It's a big distinction, a big logical distinction in philosophy between the empirical and the a priori. And some of our knowledge is empirical. Barack Obama is president. The Phillies stink this year. Philadelphia is the largest city in Pennsylvania. There are only 3 countries in North America. These are all empirical statements, things that I know through experience and things that you can only know through experience. And then there are a priori statements, and there's a priori knowledge. The same thing cannot be both. The same thing cannot both exist and not exist at the same time. Everything is equal to itself. Something which is less than something else cannot be greater than something else. The whole is greater than the part, which is one of the fundamental starting points of Euclid's geometry. Maybe I'll put some examples when I have time to think about it. There's some typical and clear a priori statements, things that we know a priori. But that's an important distinction in philosophy. And if you go through a philosophy course like this, where we're talking basically about metaphysics, epistemology, and to a certain degree logic, then knowing the difference between an empirical statement and empirical knowledge on the one hand, and an a priori statement and a priori knowledge on the other hand, is something you should definitely come out of this course with. And yes, it does figure into this essay specifically, but it's also something that as a beginning philosophy student or as an undergraduate taking a philosophy course and getting smarter about things and getting smarter about certain issues in philosophy, it's something that you should definitely know. It's not that difficult a concept, and I hope this helped a little bit. You can also, of course, look it up and have it clearly explained in any of our online philosophy resources, or you can contact me and I'll be happy to talk about it further with you.